Today we are going to be able to view a webinar with Shelly Weiner, who is a Holocaust survivor, and we're going to watch that. And we've been studying lots about the Holocaust, and then afterwards we're going to be able to ask some questions. We are doing this as a part of the Gisela Abramson Act that was put into place with DPI and the state of North Carolina, as far as it is required by law to teach 6 through 12 English and social studies about the Holocaust. Oh, it is so important just because horrible, horrible things have happened in our past, and we want to make sure that we do not repeat those things. And if we learn about them, then hopefully we don't make that mistake again.
My name is Shelly Weiner. I never had a childhood. I never had a friend, and I never had a toy.
My name is Raya Kirchnerman, and my childhood was as bad as it could be. I never had friends, I never had toys, I didn't go to school before the war. The only friend to play with is my cousin Shelly.
My father was a businessman. My mother had a grocery store that she ran from the bottom of our house. She had it set up. And I had a very happy childhood before the war.
My parents had a little business in that village. They were producing lime and selling it. They did have livestock, which my mother was taking care of.
The Germans came into our town, and immediately they started passing laws against what Jews could and couldn't do. And one of the laws that they passed is they wanted all the males, all the men, to report for relocation work duty. My grandfather had a suspicion that this was not really where they were taking the men. So he lived next door, and he created a hiding place in my mother's house for all the men. He had 7 sons, and my mother had brothers-in-laws, and all the men would spend the day there hiding, and then they'd come out for the midday meal. My cousin Raya and I would play outside in the yard, and we were told that if we saw the Nazis, they were called brown shirts, coming down the street, to come in and tell the adults. And one day we were playing out there, and we saw a Jeep with 4 of these men in the brown shirt uniforms stopping at our neighbors. We ran in and told the adults. All the men ran back to the hiding place. The women cleaned up. But my uncle, Raya's father, remained. The next thing I remember is that these men burst in, they locked the door, they wouldn't let us leave that room, and they proceeded to beat my uncle.
All the Jews were taken out of the city to a little place called Sosanki, and they were all killed.
They killed 17,500 Jews in 3 days. And my entire family was killed in that massacre. My grandfather, my uncles, my aunts, and my cousins.
The Ukrainian police was there, the Germans were there, and people, especially the police, they were taking all the princely possessions that the people brought over there, putting them on the wagons and taking home.
The day we were at the village was because my mother heard from a Polish neighbor that the next day was going to be this action, they called it, this action, where they took out all the Jews from the city, walked them to a smaller place about 6 miles away, and had dug trenches and would be shooting them. And it took them 3 days to kill 17,500 people. And that's where my entire family was murdered. Anyway, you know, the Germans could not have accomplished what they did without the help of the local population. And so they would go to the villages and they would put out pamphlets asking the locals to come and help them. And this farmer had a son who was 18 years old, and he got his friends and they decided they would go into town and they would make some money by working there. Well, when they got to town, the job they gave them was at the killing field. It was to pick up the bodies that hadn't fallen into the ravine and throw them in the ravine. Well, these young men were so horrified by what they saw that they ran back home through the woods. And on the way home, they decided to form a partisan group. The partisans were the people who lived in the woods, and they would do whatever harm they could to the Germans. You know, blow up bridges, trains, whatever.
Something I learned from the video was about the purges they committed, like in Ravna, with around like 17,000 people gone in 3 days, and how large they were, yet were just a fraction of the millions that suffered and were massacred altogether, and how they just stack and stack upon each other to form the atrocious event, the Holocaust that it is, and about how it's really just a pure sum of human suffering. That's what I learned.
I learned that through everything and the tragedies of the Holocaust that we really need to remember, and that remembering is probably the best thing for us because we won't repeat it and we will remember the tragedy and really just help us have empathy for the people that have went these tragic things.
Today I learned about the Holocaust and its survivors. One of them was today one of its survivors and her story through her bravery and the different struggles she went through. It was about her struggle through different places, the food she ate, the conditions she was living under.
Going through a traumatic experience at a young age is really traumatizing, of course, and the millions of lives that were killed is not something that should stay quiet, should really be out there.
I learned that Jews went through like a lot and that they got like discriminated for like stuff that they couldn't like control and had no reason to be like, they had no reason for that to happen.
What lesson did you learn here today that you're always going to take with you?
That everyone should be treated like the same way, and that they just didn't deserve for any of that to happen. Nobody should have to deal with that.
I think that we learned about the Holocaust, and I feel like it's an important topic and that everyone needs to learn. I feel like it teaches us about the importance of not judging everyone and kind of feeling empathy towards everyone. It shows us the injustice that people go through. We think we have life easy, but we don't know what everyone goes through. It's just important to understand and know.
What lesson are you going to take with you as you move forward in your life?
I think that what I'm taking forward from this is to not give up. We learned that Shelly didn't give up and that she felt it in her gut that she was going to get out, and she's doing bigger things now. So I think it's important to just not give up. Even though times are rough, we know that we can go through it with stuff and just learn everything.
I learned how grateful we are now about what we have and how they didn't have stuff like that back then.
I learned that Jews were treated really badly, like worse than I thought. Like how almost 20,000 people were killed in just a couple of days, and how they were only worth 2 pounds of sugar.
What lesson did you learn here today that you're always going to take with you as you move forward in your life?
To be more grateful with the things I have, because I could lose it all in just a blink of an eye.
Mainly about like the exact hardship for people that weren't put into the camps. Because usually most of the stories that you hear is about the experience of survivors in camps, but this one was someone who didn't actually go to one. They were able to avoid it.
What lesson are you going to take with you that you'll keep with you the entire life?
I think with her comment about how strong her mother and her aunt were, I think that's really important to me, just like the mother's love for their 2 girls.
The lesson I learned today is of humanity and how we should move forward with lessons we learned from our past. this is because when we have different nationalities or different backgrounds, we tend to make up things about different people, and I think we should learn more about someone before saying our thoughts and misinformation be spread about their culture or religion.
Empathize with people throughout everyday life. You don't know what they've been through, you don't know what they're going to go through, and it's just to be nice to each other, no matter what.
Something that really like stuck with me when she was speaking was about how following our own path and not leading into misinformation and to what our peers say. And that's something that's always stuck with me, and it really just comes out of light when she said it, as she experienced something very drastic.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we learn is about how individual stories are very important. Each individual person is very, very important. It's not just the numbers, but it's important to learn each story and each survivor, because everybody was the world to somebody.
The Holocaust happened because good people did not speak up. Good people did not speak up. They didn't like what was happening, but they waited for someone else to say something. And I feel very strongly that every one of us has an obligation, particularly young people now, to speak up when they hear something is wrong. Somebody's saying something or doing something that is hurting us. And otherwise, the world that you're building is not going to be the same. If you don't take charge of your generation and you're speaking up against evil and wrongdoing, you won't have a good world.
I try to really make it very personal to them, just as they are the world to their families and everything. These people were also the world to theirs as well, and how it's important for them to take away just to be kind to each other and to not have hatred towards other people for any reason.
What would you like people to keep in mind about this lesson as an ongoing effort throughout the entire state?
Oh, just that it's always important to learn as much as you possibly can to hopefully not repeat actions from the past.